You were born ready, I guess. Yeah, we're live here. How are you this evening?
Hi. Thank you, Kevin. I'm great. It's a great opportunity to sit down and speak with you. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward for our joint podcast.
Yeah, you've been quite busy here recently. I think on Friday you participated in one of our Engage events.
Yeah, it
Um,
was it was a great event.
yeah,
7 vendors pitching. 7-minute pitch, which is quite challenging to squeeze any message in 7 minutes. I think there was a very good narration. Corey and Matt and the team did very good narration throughout the session. I really enjoyed it, and we got very good feedback afterwards. And people who followed up with us. It was fun. It was really
um,
fun.
that's great. So Matt will say that it was the first Engage or pitch that I hadn't participated on, and he'll say it was probably
That's
the best one because I was not on that one. So
yeah, yeah.
Matt, if you're watching, I know you. Yeah, I know you.
Yeah. So first of all, they were discussing it. This is the
Ah,
first one without you. That was the
oh,
item on the agenda, and they were laughing a little bit about it, and they were trying to tag team like you and Matt. But I think you have a special connection, and the tag team between you and Matt is unique. So don't give up on him.
all
Keep on
right.
doing every now and then. I think there's a very good vibe going on.
All right. Well, they're trying to tell me I should know my role. So anyway, maybe I'll sneak back in on one of those. But
That's a different discussion, CEOs. What you always want to pitch in and start, rolling up your sleeves and start doing the work, but it doesn't work like that.
yeah, no, I'm sure you can rate. I often give the example like early on when especially with this consulting firm that I started in DC, I had to be I had to, be in QuickBooks and balance the bank account every night. And then I had to log into the website and put a page up there. And inevitably the next morning, somebody would come in and look at the page that I put up and see, five or six misspellings. And so I realized early on, like, get out of the way, let the smarter people, so if there's anything I did learn along the way, it's, hire smarter people and, yeah, and get out of the way. So, but,
That's the key. That's the key ingredient to superb leadership. I fully agree. Know your
well,
limits and hire very good people. The day is it's an extreme statement, but the day you can go to the beach, really go to the beach,
mhm.
or anywhere else you enjoy yourself, and the work goes on without you being involved. That's the day you build a good team and a good procedures in place, and you only need it every now and then, but not for every action in the company, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always we're discussing. I think this is fourth startup, and you think you've seen it all, and you think you think you're ready for it all, but then inevitably, you launch and something smacks you in the face, and so it's just the nature of entrepreneurship. But so look, I really want to get into your background because I'm fascinated by the journey, and we were talking earlier about where you guys are in creating a category, which is on one hand it's unnerving, it's challenging, it's part-time frustrating, but then it can be so exhilarating, especially when you get those like light bulb moments and you start to get velocity. And so I'm really curious about this journey you went on because early on, so taking it way back, early days for you, I think your first maybe foray into computers and the networking and the service desk was with the IDF with MRAM. Is that right?
Yeah. I can honestly tell you that like most things in life, it was all almost by mistake, so to speak. I wanted to be a Navy officer, and I was fighting to go to. I didn't have the right, physical criteria, health criteria, and I was fighting, and I finally convinced them to take me under, conditions. And at the last day of the boot camp, so to speak, it was a week selection boot camp. The doctor told me that it's a true story. He told me, I'll better kick you off right now because if I kick you off down the road, you won't have any good, places in the army to serve in. So he kicked me off. And the day before I was drafted, at 5 p.m. in the afternoon, I passed the exam, so to speak, for the computer sciences, school, so to speak, the Army Computer Sciences School, which was a very prestigious, school. And I had to sign, an additional, period of time. And I made the decision at 5 p.m. and the morning after I started my Army, career. And very soon, after maybe 12 months afterwards, I was managing a big facility with thousands of endpoints, very complicated, setup of mainframes and Unixes and PCs and data collection units and all, before I was 20. And I really started, my career in IT. And this is why I have a very heartwarming, feeling in my heart when I'm talking to MSPs and MSSPs, because I used to do their job. I used to, manage, the complicated, environment of network and hardware and software and changing all the time and so on at a very early age. Then after I left the Army, I had to, get biology out of the system. I loved biology, so I did my first degree in biology, second degree in, I did an MBA. And I was working all the time, at night as a computer operator, at day as a network administrator. And I finally had a very good chance of becoming a manager of information systems at a very early age in a startup. And it was a crazy, crazy time. You're talking about startup. We grew, 10 times, tenfold in a period of maybe 4 years, from 30 people to 350, build intensive operations worldwide. I was managing a team of 30 people in IT. And we did all kind of things that people call today DevOps and SecOps. And we didn't have the names back then, but we did it. So I have a very strong background in IT. And at one point of time, I had the magic, if there was a problem, I would figure it out. I could, solve the problem. I knew what to do. It's gone. I don't have it anymore. It's long gone. But I did have, the magic touch back then. So again, and MSPs are just another iteration of how to do IT in a more business efficient way. But it's the same challenge we had back then.
So what was the drive behind the biology degree? You're coming out of coming out of the Army and working in computers. I mean, was that just more of an interest when you were younger, or what was the idea behind biology?
No, I really wanted to be a biology scientist, so to speak. And back then, today is completely different, by the way. There is the cross or the intersection between computer sciences and biology. There's a field called bioinformatics. By the way, I have 3 sons. 2 of them are learning in the university right now, and both of them are learning bioinformatics.
Wow.
The second one got the idea. The first one, called up and they're, talking who started and who thought about it first and so on. But I really wanted to learn biology because I thought I would do something about it. But then I was fascinated about the cross between business and technology. And I thought the right way to do business and technology is in IT. Back then, we're talking about the 90s. So back then, the right cross was in IT. You could have implemented the system and solve a business problem. I'll give you an example. It's a trivial example these days, but we had a big subsidiary in the US, and we started, capturing leads. So we automated using CRM the way the leads come in, and you get automated response with materials. Or I started implementing, what turns to be WebEx later on. It started as a startup called Contigo to solve the problem of salespeople need to travel for each and every first engagement in order to do an assessment whether or not our technology is fit for that customer. And you could hop on a Contigo WebEx session, look at the screens and see that feasible or not feasible, and save time and money. So I really solved the business problem back then. It was fascinating. Really
very
fascinating.
cool. Yeah, very cool. So that 300-person startup or that business, was that the insurance company that you'd gone to?
No, it was back then at the end of the 90s. If you remember, some of you probably remember, there was a Y2K problem, year 2000. And many organizations modernized, either went to buy Oracle or SAP, or modernized what was called back then legacy to web. So they invested a lot of money to repair the Y2K problem. And now that they invested, they wanted new screens. So we had an automated AI-based, again, back then, nobody called it AI, but it was AI-based system that analyzed the green screens, the IBM mainframe green screens, and turned that to any type of UI. It started with Java, and then, VB, and so on. With the click of a button, thousands screens. So we did very well between 95, 96 to 2000. We were really the first Israeli IPO, one of the first Israeli IPOs in NASDAQ.
Wow.
And I'll tell you a fun fact. Our CEO and co-founder bet with us, with R&D team, that if we reach a valuation of $500 million, he will eat his hat. It's a true story. And for a very short period of time, just before the bubble bust at 2001, we were above $500 million worth of valuation. And I vividly remember him sitting in the startup kitchen. Yeah, we had a big kitchen where everybody were meeting and so on. And actually, putting the hat in his mouth, so to speak, eating it. Because we hit the $500 million valuation. Wow. He lost the bet.
Wow. He's keeping true to his word. That's awesome.
He is a great guy. He reinvented that startup 3 times, each time under, different technology, different business problem. But yeah. So we did fascinating things back then. But then, the dot-com bust and so on. And I decided to move on. And I took a position as a VP of information technology for a mid-sized insurance company. Funny enough, our first project was implemented my startup software for that insurance company.
Really?
We used it again. It was legacy to web, so we took the AS400, insurance system, and we created screens that were carried over the website. It was, one of the first times anyone did it, and we could have shown premiums, cost over the internet. People could have started buying using the website.
Wow.
Which sounds really ridiculous right now, but back then it was really invention.
Yeah.
And and we did. It was a great experience, but it was a different culture. Yeah. So if you financial institutes and financial organizations, it's not a startup, it's not high-tech environment, and I was missing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes in life, something happens and you immediately know that there is guidance for you to do something else. So I was doing well in this insurance company, and there was a new CEO coming in, and he brought all his team from his previous company. So and he replaced all the top management. We were like 6 people. We were all let go, and he brought his own team. And immediately when he did it, I knew that this is time to go back to high tech. To go back to but I decided no longer to stay in IT, because there's back then there was some kind of a ceiling to how advanced you can be and how critical you are to the company. And I came back to high tech and started my career as a product manager, which was my second career. So complete changeover. Sometimes people do something, let you go, force you to do something, and you recalculate, and it's all for the best, because I did a very interesting, very successful career afterwards as a product manager. And who knows, maybe I wouldn't have done it without him pushing me out of the door, in a non-relevant way to whatever happened before.
Yeah. So the next companies you went to, there's, I think, very mid-sized, but then eventually you landed at SAP for, gosh, what, almost 10 years, something like that?
Yeah. I started as an individual contributor, as a product manager, as an individual contributor. But you know how big organization work. There's an opportunity to grow. So after the first year, I was selected top talent. That's top 2% of the company, and I got an opportunity to do a project that is, an amazing project. That project, gave me that 2%, top talent, award. What we did, and that's really interesting. Everybody knows SAP UI. Then, especially, it's improved since then. Is not good. The GUI is not good, and we were embarking as part of the technology platform to do a big project to renew the UI. And we were sitting a group of people, from all over the world, very smart people, in a room in Germany. SAP is a German company.
Mm-hmm.
And our SVP, senior person, said, we should do a survey, a project to talk with users. And I want us to talk with 100 users, not one, not two, not 10, 100. And nobody, and I was new, like 3 months in the company, 4 months in the company. And she said, who's volunteering? And I raised my hand, part because I'm bold and part because I was new. So I didn't know what's good for me.
Right.
And immediately after that, in the coffee break, everybody told me, you're crazy and this is suicidal and it will never succeed. You shouldn't do it. But we did it. We actually talked with 100 users from 10 companies, big and small, all around the world, in the US, in Europe, in Asia Pacific. And we captured the way they were interacting with the SAP systems. We really sat down next to them for 2 hours. We went physically to their sites.
Wow.
I was there, for instance, in Intel in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, or in Colgate in New Jersey, or in Adidas in Germany, things like that. And we captured how they worked, with sticky notes and with auxiliary tools like Excel, and really captured the way they did it. And then we did something amazing. This is one of the most amazing things I ever did. We went into a room. All the room walls were painted with a color that allows you to attach and detach sticky notes.
Huh.
And we captured everything we captured, we put on sticky notes. And after 2 days of rearranging the sticky notes, patterns emerged. Wow. And after 3 days, we had design concepts on how to redesign our system. And we had very concrete recommendations and patterns and design guidelines. And it went all the way up. This paper that we created went all the way up to the CEO of SAP back then. It landed on his desk, and he was congratulating the SVP for initiating that, and so on. And that really boosted my career at SAP. And I was lucky to become very quickly a VP of product management, responsible for 2 product lines. One on-prem, the legacy technology of SAP, component of that I took from 4,000 to 12,000 productive customers. So, big surge in adoption. And I also started and initiated a set of new public cloud, call it services or products on top of SAP Cloud Platform, that after the first year generated $7 million in revenue, and yield 200 productive customers, which was a big win back then, about 10 years ago for SAP. And then after almost 10 years, I decided it's time to move on.
Yeah,
it's time to move on, and I it was very hard for me, but I left SAP. After very successful. I left a lot of friends, a lot of colleagues all around the world, but it was the right decision to do, And then I became what I am today, an entrepreneur and a CEO, so to speak.
Yeah. But I guess what was the biggest challenge, I guess, in transitioning? I mean, because being at a large company like that for, 9 years, 10 years, and then transitioning into, CEO startup land, was that difficult transition, or was that, you kind of jumped in with both feet? Any lessons learned in the early days?
So first of all, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. So what at least worked for me is that I got good tools and good concepts being a product manager.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good training for life.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I didn't have any sales or marketing experience. I interacted with sales and marketing, but never did it. And the most difficult thing is that you are alone. You're completely alone. In large organization, there's layers and layers of support and layers of people giving you on all fronts. On IT, someone is configuring your laptop, on marketing, on sales, on facilities, everything. So you need to start from scratch. But the most challenging things I would say is that, and you can relate to that, is that you have an idea and you're materializing it into a product, and there's so much uncertainty and doubt and second guessing, and is it going to work, and you pivot and you're thirsty for people's feedback, but you don't want to do something based on one person feedback. There's a lot of you lose sleep a lot because of the uncertainty and doubt and second guessing, and it takes time.
Yeah. I'm smiling and nodding because you definitely lose a lot of sleep, especially early days and pivoting and getting into the minimum viable product. So you kind of created this entrepreneurship journey, and with ActiveVal, you've got equally impressive co-founder Asaf. I guess how did you guys meet? I mean, he's got a really impressive background, early days with DLP, and and just
Asaf is an amazing guy. Asaf is an amazing guy. First of all, his biggest love in life is customers. Really, you don't see a lot of CTOs. Asaf is my co-founder and the CTO. You don't see a lot of CTOs that really, really, really like talking, enjoy speaking, solving customer issues. That's his number one hobby. The second hobby is compliance, data risk. The Asaf really understands, digs it, is updated and so on. Asaf is a successful, serial entrepreneur. This is his third startup. So when he graduated from the Navy, where he built, sonar systems, and those were the basis for his concept on how to classify and, find patterns in text, and as a result, protect files. More than 20 years ago, he co-founded the company called Port Authority, which is a great name, and they were one of the two leading DLPs back in the 2000s. They were competing against a company called Vontu fiercely.
Yeah.
In banks like TD and Citibank and Bank of America, all the giants, and they were acquired. Port Authority, Asaf's company, were acquired by WebSense, and his product is still developed and maintained as part of ForcePoint, offering to date. 20 years later, solid background, and he kept on working for WebSense. He spent 10 years in the US, so 10 years in the Valley, and a lot of traveling among customers in the US at Port Authority and then WebSense. And then he co-founded another company. He fell in love in sales enablement, so he co-founded the company that helps salespeople to improve their sales enablement. And he sold that company as well to an Australian company. And we were introduced by someone who knows us both. And he said, Guy, I think you should talk with Asaf because he's an expert. And I wrote him an email. And Asaf being Asaf, he wrote me like 3 pages email saying, I did it. It doesn't make sense. What are you talking about? Really, honestly. And I said, yeah, let's go for coffee. And we went for a coffee, and he got interested after 10, 20 minutes. And after, half an hour, he said, this is interesting. And very quickly he joined me. And we're working together ever since, and he's the driving force around what we're doing. He's the one, by the way, he's the one that suggested that eventually big enterprises have their own, ability to build a stack around discovery and compliance and, encryption and file monitoring, all of that. And they can, but small and medium enterprises, and more importantly, their MSPs and MSSPs don't have the luxury.
Right.
And he said, let's not go. You guy did something at SAP, big enterprises. I did DLP for big enterprises. Let's go for the small ones. And we were lucky to work with early adopters like Steve Rotkovich, who's influenced our design, through Choice Cyber, greatly. We were lucky to work with Alex Putman, who's our head of customer success today. And believe it or not, she was one of our early adopters, an MSP from Poughkeepsie, New York. She sold her business, and through an introduction made by one of our investors, he met her and he found out that she sold her business. I picked up the phone, called her, and she's working with us ever since. So imagine one of your early adopters so in love with the software that is, working with other MSPs to ensure their success, going on. So, we're blessed with partners like Steve, with early adopters like Alex, and with, passionate people about compliance and risk like Asaf.
That's great. Yeah, Steve is a terrific guy. He's located locally here in the Maryland area, and so yeah, he's been pretty influential in this space. So that's definitely a good one to have on board. So
he is a great guy. He has a very solid business based on a lot of professionalism and hands-on activities. Very good, interaction with him throughout the years. So yeah, awesome. We were blessed.
Let's get into ActiveOps, because we're talking about like creating a category, and I love a lot of the things that you've built into this. I mean, and we'll kind of get to this, the financial risk factors, which I think is really, really an interesting evolution of the platform. But take us through, like, what were you trying to solve? Because you're targeting, arguably, the most vulnerable or exposed, segments of the marketplace. So what were you trying to build, and take us through the platform and what you guys are doing?
Yeah. So first of all, we wanted to transform how organizations at that size, and most MSPs most of the time are dealing with organizations that are small and medium, up to 500 on average. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to transform the way they're safeguarding their clients, I would say crown jewels, so to speak, the most, I would say, important assets, which are the data, the sensitive data, the sensitive files, and so on. And thinking, and again, enterprises have the luxury to build, more and more layers and add more and more capabilities and deploy more and more, employees, and build security teams of tens of people and so on. And also, kind of glue together different products to some kind of a solution which MSPs and MSSPs cannot handle, and of course do not have the expertise. And we came from the background of busting the myth that network monitoring and endpoint security is good enough. That's a myth. Mm-hmm. That's a myth that if you're going to the big enterprises, they understand it very well, and they're adding layers. But many MSPs that we talk with, understand the need for network monitoring, understand the need for hardware monitoring if a disk fails, understand the need to patch operating systems, so software, but don't have the concept of data governance and how do you manage data and sensitive data. So we're thinking this is this is something. This is a kind of a mission in life. Let's help MSPs and MSSPs keep away the bad guys for their customers, which eventually requires understanding and protecting the data at the core, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we were geared towards MSPs to begin with, by the way. From day one, we built the platform again with early adopters like Steve and others. We did not go for the enterprise first and then went down to MSPs. We built a multi-tenant portal. We built a multi-tier offering. We built the data risk assessments, for instance, to simplify the way MSPs approach their prospect and customers and how they show them how something that is business worth. So we were thinking about MSPs from the get-going. It's not an afterthought, so to speak.
Yeah. So it's great, right? Because you're building the multi-tenancy up front, but then you're also building in, and this is where most MSPs struggle. It doesn't matter, like we were talking earlier about, I was going kind of down the startup lane with ID Agent, and it doesn't matter how simple or how complex the solution is. MSPs need that, that need that support. They need that hook to be able to articulate to their customers. And so I think that's an invaluable part of what you guys are doing, because it's one thing to say, hey, here's a product, here's some information about how to sell it, its value proposition. But, as as most MSPs will admit, they're overwhelmed and they just need to, help me sell this, help me show you the value. And I think you guys do a great job of helping, the channel articulate the value really, really quickly.
Yeah, I would, completely agree. So many MSPs, and we're all IT people. Okay, I'm an IT person in background. We love to talk about vulnerabilities and gaps and missing patches and technology in general. Right. Most of the time, if you're an IT person in an organization, you're talking with your CFO or COO. If you're an MSP, you're talking with a business owner or C-level executives. They don't have the capacity nor the understanding to grasp all of that. And it's all sounds like, chatter, like, white noise at the end of the day. But what are the two things that every security product is trying to protect from? I would say there are two things. One, productivity. You don't want productivity to be down, computer down, network down, website down. That's one thing. The second thing is your sensitive data. We're building layer upon layer. In our vocabulary, it's the alarm on the window and the lock on the door. But eventually, if a hacker or burglar wants to go in, they will, And once they do, or your insiders will take something out, once they do, if you don't have an understanding of the data, you cannot protect it. So if you're coming to a business owner and showing him the financial value, the total potential damage, in a fair estimation, and you explain where you got it, and that's relevant to the way they not just justify ActiveFile, not just justify a certain product, but the entire stack of that MSP security. And again, differentiate yourself. If you're talking vulnerabilities and so on, come to them and tell them how much risk they have. It's also a very good connection. We're seeing it all the time. And I'm sure you heard and you're familiar with that. Renewal of cyber insurance policies, right? Yeah. Premiums are up, coverage are down. So what we're seeing is when you can articulate to clearly how much data you have at risk and how you protect it, then that's much easier for even from a cyber insurance perspective.
Absolutely. Sorry. I was just going to say, early on, if you remember back in the day, and I think they still do it, but like the Ponemon Institute came out with this, here's the cost per breach per record kind of a thing. And it's very, very one size fits all generic, but I think the way you guys go about quantifying the risk is interesting. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you guys structure that?
Sure. So we are adhering these days to a very, very interesting model called the FAIR model, FAIR. It's a non-for-profit organization, mostly comprised from experts in the market, US market. And they build, two, I would say, branches, lost magnitude and lost frequency. So eventually, and it all goes into information security and data security. And the loss magnitude, and this is the core of our algorithms and our AI-based approach and so on, it's comprised of primary risk and secondary risk. Primary risk being, how much you're going to pay in attorneys and auditors and IR teams and loss of reputation and loss of customers, which is usually the biggest concern. And the secondary one are the fines and all kind of requirements for you to report and so on. So we adhere to that framework, and we are differentiating between different types of sensitive data, whether it's PII or PHI or CUI. By the way, very interesting because of CMC level 2. And the built-in FAIR model, that we are adhering to is giving room for calculating, a fair estimation, a fair in terms of, being, a good estimation of the risk based on all of those factors. So Pneuma Institute is something more, I would say, a legacy type, which existed in the market, but the market has evolved. And check out FAIR. It's they've got very good in-depth explanations, examples, and a vibrant community around them. So it's a good up-to-date source for risk analysis and calculation.
Yeah, I think the more that you can help the channel, that the MSP, the MSSP, tailor that risk, it becomes, it materializes, becomes more real versus, again, this kind of one size fits all. And, and Verizon does, pretty darn good job with their DBIR and coming up with estimates of per record. But, the way way you guys are approaching it, where it's tailored around that organization, becomes more tangible, right? It's something that they can really wrap their minds around, and I imagine that really helps that sales process.
It helps the MSP. Yeah, it helps the MSPs to win over prospect and continuously update through monthly or quarterly reviews with their customers, because again, nobody imagines to do network monitoring once a year.
Right.
It doesn't happen. Nobody is imagining to do patch management once a year, right? Why should you do data risk analysis, data governance, data discovery and classification, data monitoring once a year, fill in a survey? It doesn't make sense because the data is alive. Okay, if you've done a survey today, in an hour from now, it's different. Now, risk and the financial risk in US dollars is the basis for everything we do. So it starts for discovery and classification. Very quickly, per classification, how much do you have in specific PII? Medical records within HIPAA, specific credit cards within PCI DSS. But it continues from there. We also monitor automatically the flow of incoming and outgoing a stream of files in and out of the organization through every application and every user action without any integration. So I can tell you, and again, it's all risk-driven, all monetary value. I can tell you that last week, $200,000, worth of risk across 15 files, 7 file types from 17 users left the organization through Slack, through Skype, through WhatsApp Web, uploaded to Cerner, which is okay if you're an HIPAA compliant, organization. Imagine that then something magical happens. You don't know what you don't know. It's kind of equivalent to what you did at ID Agent a couple of years ago. People didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know how much, passwords and email lists and all of that were leaked and left the organization. We're showing them kind of with a torchlight, things that they're not aware of. And people, I talk with people, then they're saying, yeah, we've got everything on the cloud. Yeah, of course. But things leave the cloud. Leave the cloud because people download and copy and paste and move. Productivity reasons. By the way, that's a bigger concern than even ransomware.
Yeah.
So that is driven by the risk, and it's shown by the risk. And when we remediate the risk, when the MSP decides to selectively, encrypt different classifications, like those that are at more higher risk, then you see the risk going down. So it's all business-driven discussion. You've got $3 million worth of risk. You've got 15 files with $1.4 million worth of risk. You encrypted them. Now it's 3 million minus 1.4 million. It's only 1.6.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. It's not files and records. We can show you how many files and how many records, but you're moving from discussing, technicalities to discussing liability at risk in monetary value, and everything is fed, through that. So you're right. The risk and the monetary value is a driver for a successful, a data risk assessments at customers. It's a way for you to communicate on an ongoing basis the thing that MSPs and their customers care about most, which is the sensitive data.
Yeah, I mean, and talk about changing behaviors. I mean, when you can quantify it that way, I mean, there's security awareness training and phishing testing and stuff like that, and that's got to continue, right? And that's behavior change. But when you can quantify that risk, the actual risk, that is transversing the network or leaving or coming in, when you can actually quantify it in real time, and say this is exactly why we need to change our behavior, right? Or this is why we need to start encrypting, or this is why we need to understand our supply chain better. I mean, there's so many different directions that this takes, the conversation. And it should be like it's one of those sales, obviously more than a sales tool, right? It's a catalyst to, in my opinion, to sell probably 4 or 5 different additional security applications, just by what you guys are exposing. Right. And so there's obviously the need to encrypt and do all that stuff, but then there's all those ancillary security measures that you need to put in place that wrap around what you guys are doing as well. So I mean, that's why I get excited about it, because I feel like, you're quantifying, you're showing you have the potential to change behavior, and it's based on actual, your daily work.
Yeah. Action. Yeah. So one of the views you can see in the system is not just how much data is at risk in transition through different applications, no integration needed prior to that, but also you can have the user view, and you'll be amazed, how much people are hoarding, in terms of sensitive data, and how much they're actually exfiltrating on an ongoing basis. Again, they're being productive. They're uploading to monday.com. They're sending their friends through Slack. They're using, different tools. And we are now working on tying that to the change of behavior. So telling the users you're doing something, setting up automatic AI-based thresholds, notifying the users themselves. I don't think most of the users, most of the time, they're not malicious. They're just careless. If you can self-guide them, you're doing something, or you're doing too much, or is it really necessary? Things like that. So phishing simulations and so on is a viable, thing to avoid malware coming into the organization. But we can do the same, and we're doing the same, and we're building the infrastructure to instruct the users and self-guide them, not just once a year when you're doing a phishing simulation and training, because they're doing it all the time. Okay, and you can correct them on the fly. You don't need to wait for something to happen. Do you really necessary to do so? Is it important? Be aware of, and so on, while they're interacting. So I think there is a correction, and guidance system that is built into Actify, because it works on the user level as well, in a very, flexible way.
Yeah, look, I'm a guy that's got a history degree, and so if I can figure this stuff out, oh my gosh, that's why I get excited about it, because I think it's an exciting part about creating category, and I think as next 12, 18 months, I think just about every MSSP has to be, using, a tool like this. I think it's just the risk. And then we got into, talking about cyber insurance and quantifying it. And then, showing proactive measures of how you're mitigating risk. I mean, I think this is, going to be a vital part of that as we move forward, and it helps you sell. I keep going back to that, but again, that's one of the biggest challenges for every one of these IT, service providers is convincing their customers of the actual risk, and not just the boogeyman or smoke and mirrors. You can actually quantify it based on actual activity. And so I think, I get pretty pumped for where you guys are going.
Yeah, we help MSPs unlock growth with Actifel in different directions. We provide them competitive advantage. We're helping them avoid, and their customers avoiding, financial implication. We support the regulatory and compliance framework. We help them apply proactive measures and eventually build their brand. Yeah. And you're right, the next 18 months are interesting to see. By the way, as and more privacy regulations are built in the US, on a state and on a federal level. And this is why I'm so excited that Bill Falk has recently joined us as our president of go-to-market. Some of you may heard of Bill. He was one of the early people working for Kaseya 20 years ago, and he built the entire sales organization of Kaseya back then. He then had the leadership of the sales and marketing organization, the same thing at Datto later on. And we are blessed again that and see how things work. Bill and I were introduced by a partner of ours. So one of our MSP partners, James, introduced us. He is a true believer in what we do, and he introduced us to Bill, and we started working together. And he's a great example of the potential of this market category. And I want to expand on that a little bit, Kevin, because you created a market category back then with dark web monitoring and ID agent that really didn't exist, and especially didn't exist. And you went for MSPs, started with big enterprises, and you went to MSPs. And we're doing the same. We're building a new category. There was, and there is no, there is a big drive, by the way, for data security in enterprises. There's a new hype cycle at Gartner, for people who know that, and it's really booming up right now. Data security posture manager, management, data risk assessment, and so on. So we're creating a new category, and it's challenging. You're trying to explain the way to do things different, but with the addition of Bill, I think, and his experience on how to build market presence and positioning and so on, I feel confident that we'll be more successful in what we're doing, and build more value and more awareness to what we're doing in the market.
Yeah. Well, look, I think you guys are absolutely on the right track, and I'm for one, really looking forward to seeing how this plays out, because I think, again, you guys are creating a category out in front, and I think every MSP, this time next year, 12 months from now, should have at minimum have heard of you guys or have been using you guys for a little bit now. So I'm kind of bullish on your growth moving forward. So look, with that, I mean, I really want to thank you for joining me. What's the best way for the audience to get in touch with you and find out more?
So first of all, go to actifile.com, and there's an option to set up a meeting, or email me directly, Guyb, Guyb, like brother, at actifile.com. I'll be happy to interact with you directly. We're at IT Nation in 2 weeks from now on November 8th. So we have a booth, and we'll love to have you over there if you have the chance. And stay tuned to Channel Program, because we're a proud sponsor of Channel Program for many months now, and we're very happy with the interaction. And if you're a Channel Program, MSP member, then stay tuned. We'll be, working together for in the future as well.
Awesome. Well, look forward to hopefully you and I can shake hands down in Orlando here in a couple of weeks. We'll be down there.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course,
So
I will be there. I will be
Yeah.
there with our team, and we love to meet you and Matt.
Awesome. Great. Well,
Thank you.
I appreciate you hopping on late in the evening there, your time. But so we'll get this thing out, and you guys are doing some great work. So I really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you, Kevin. Take care, and thank you very much.